So I think learning and development as a sector, as a profession, has a preoccupation with making things, which isn't wrong. That's not necessarily a problem in itself, but I think that's over time moved from making and producing events, facilitated session, classrooms, etc., to making online content. And I think one of the dangers of that impulse is that digital transformation means making digital things only and transferring everything into some form of digital experience or content. So I think that impulse needs to be tempered by helping people and organisations solve problems using digital tools and technology. So I think that will be the shift in focus. And that means focusing on meaningful problems. It means usually helping people get things done. So I think one of the challenges, again, for learning and development is actually not to focus on learning, to focus on problem solving, and to focus on problem solving using the data that's available from digital, using the kind of practices and ways of working that digital requires, not just as available, but requires, and really applying those to that sense of solving people's problems. So I think it feels like an obvious thing, but that's actually quite a significant change for an industry that runs events, puts on programs, makes courses, runs learning management systems, etc. I think it's very tempting to just say digitize that stuff, but I think that's not the change that's required. Actually, the change is required on focusing on those most valuable areas. I think everybody is able to do it, actually, but there'll be some kind of organisational, institutional challenge. So I think there is I think where there'll be some skills challenges, I think there is a problem there. And I think one area is in using data and evidence for analysis and decision making. I think that's probably not the strongest suit for learning and development. One of the challenges is that learning systems, obviously, they tend to produce learning data. Learning data is fine, but doesn't necessarily solve business problems. It describes other kind of activities. So I think shifting the focus of data and analytics is really fundamental. I think there's one area where learning and development is really poor, actually, is what I would call the product management function. And a product manager would be a person or a role that's really good at understanding what users need and want, and has great insight about user requirements, someone that understands the business really well, and someone who knows what technology can do. And bringing those three parts together in a product management approach is really, really important, and to keep applying those tools to the most valuable problems. I think that's one area I think that any organisation, but the industry needs to develop. I think it's fundamental because the partnership with the business is what our learners or users or audience would expect. No one expects or wants a kind of isolated experience, I think, and no one would expect or want learning to be separated from their working day and their working life. So if you take that as the rising expectation from users, then we have to partner with other parts of the organisation, and increasingly perhaps even other organisations, to make sure that we're meeting those expectations in the most joined up and intuitive and sensible way possible. So working in isolation is very rarely, if ever, going to achieve that. I think the most important thing anybody needs to do with any digital change is to get as close as possible to your users. Really understand what they're trying to do, why, what the barriers are, what the impediments are, and make sure that becomes the foundation of everything you try to do from there on, and gather a lot of information from your users. That's the top priority, is to be kind of, as I said before, irritatingly obsessed with the users and what they're trying to get done. So I think that's probably the most important change. I think another priority is to sort of avoid the equation of technology with digital. Technology is it's a required ingredient of digital, but it's not the outcome. And I think a lot of L&D organisations can fall into the trap of systems implementation and thinking that creates digital change, and actually it can do exactly the opposite. It can actually lock you in to certain things that you might want to be able to change. So I think sort of avoiding that on the basis that you need to continually act quickly based on evidence from users. So I think one of the things that learning should be championing, and all of us should be championing in an environment where the organisation is championing digital change, digital transformation, is to show how and why development of skills and ways of working is valuable. If everything's going to change, then people need to be able to deal with that change. They need to be able to do things differently. They need new skills, new ways of working, new ways of understanding the world. What better lens to describe that through than really good learning experiences and learning outcomes? So I think learning organisations can become fluent in describing how learners can be applied to improving the organisation through how they learn and through the evidence of how they learn. So I think that's a really exciting area. I think it's something we should focus much more on. And I think there's quite an opportunity for L&D there, just to think about it slightly differently perhaps.